The storm began unexpectedly. The morning had been sunny, with the light reflecting off the pristine snowdrifts. The blue sky was inspiring and joyful. It seemed like it was still December, but in reality, it was late March. Soon, everything would start to melt. But after lunch, everything suddenly changed. A cold wind began to blow, and the temperature dropped. Clouds rolled in from the north, soon covering the entire sky. Snow started to fall. The wind howled with renewed force, picking up the snowflakes and swirling them with wild speed. People returning from work wrapped their scarves tighter and buried their faces deeper into their hoods. In such weather, Nina was also rushing home. Today was a special day, she had so many plans, but now this storm was ruining everything. Today marked exactly 5 years since she married her one and only, the incomparable Cole. Oh, how much she loved him. Sometimes she wondered what she had done to deserve such happiness. Cole was handsome, while she saw herself as just a plain, gray mouse. It had all started 7 years ago, in a storm just like this one. Nina had been returning home from the library. She had to stay late because she was working on her thesis, and the book she needed was only available there. So she sat in the library until late, and then missed the last bus. Nina was standing at the bus stop, crying. She didn't have money for a taxi, and it was a long way home since she lived in the suburbs. At home, in an old house, her sick mother was waiting for her. It was time to feed her, give her medicine, but Nina didn't know what to do. The wind was cold, the snow was falling, and tears streamed down her cheeks. Yes, she could have lived in a dormitory, but she couldn't leave her sick mother after her stroke, so she was torn between her studies and home. Then, a huge truck stopped next to her. "Hey there! Why are you crying?" a young driver called out, shouting over the noise of the wind. Nina waved him off, as if to say, "What's it to you?" "Get in the cab," he shouted again. "Come on, I won't hurt you. I'll take you wherever you need to go. There won't be any more buses until morning. Get in, I promise I won't touch you." "Where do you need to go?" "To High Drive," Nina finally replied. The driver seemed normal enough. His face looked honest. At least, it seemed that way to her in the streetlights, through the falling snow. "That's exactly where I'm headed," the driver exclaimed. "Come on, get in. I don't have any money." Nina shouted back over the wind. "What do you think, I'm a taxi," the guy laughed. "I'll take you for free." After hesitating a bit more, Nina agreed. The guy reached out his strong, sturdy hand and practically pulled her inside. "Well, that's better," he said with a smile. "I was driving by, saw a girl standing there, crying. My heart just sank. I figured you missed the last bus, right?" Nina only nodded in response. She stayed mostly silent during the drive, occasionally answering in short sentences. But Cole, as the driver was named, kept chatting away. He told her that he had come to this city from a far northern town after his parents died. He had worked many jobs, and recently, he had been working on a construction site. The pay was good and on time, and they had even provided him with a cheap room. It wasn't Cole's dream job, but it was something. Yeah, life was good in our town, quiet and peaceful. But here, the hustle and bustle can make your head spin. But what can you do? "You've got to live," the driver said confidently, gripping the wheel and peering into the snowy curtain. "So, you want to become a teacher?" "A kindergarten teacher," Nina corrected. "Oh, that's great. It's fun with little kids." Cole nodded. Nina just smiled in response. Cole was funny and simple. In just a few minutes, he had told her his whole life story, somehow making her feel at ease. Before she knew it, they had reached her house. Nina thanked him and was about to open the door when Cole suddenly held her hand. She paled and stared at the driver in fear. Maybe he wasn't as simple as he seemed. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Cole grinned. Did I scare you? Sorry, I just wanted to ask for your number, can I? Why? The color returned to Nina's cheeks in a rush, and she blushed furiously. Well, I'd like to call you, maybe ask you out, unless you're seeing someone. No, I'm not seeing anyone. Nina blushed even more and, to hide it, bent her head down, pretending to rummage in her purse. Then she tore a sheet from her notebook and wrote down her mobile number. Just make sure to call me after 3 when classes are over, she said shyly. Got it, Cole winked at her. Then his hand disappeared behind the seat, and he pulled out a chocolate bar, offering it to her. Here, have some. Thanks, she muttered, taking the chocolate bar before quickly getting out of the cab so that Cole wouldn't see her blush again. At the door, her mother met her. Bonnie wasn't an old woman yet, but after her stroke, she could barely move with the help of a walker. Who did you come home with? She asked slowly, stretching out the syllables as Nina rushed into the hallway. That's Cole, Nina replied, smiling awkwardly. Mom, can you believe it? I missed the last bus, and he gave me a ride. I don't know what I would have done without him. The weather's so awful out there. Awful indeed, Bonnie grumbled as she shuffled slowly toward the kitchen. Just be careful he doesn't turn your head, because you're so gullible. Anyone could trick you. Or have you forgotten how they use you and toss you away like an old rag? And who will help you then? Your mom again. Nina turned pale, tears welling up in her eyes. Why did her mother have to bring up the painful memories from a few years ago? Mom, you're saying cruel things, Nina said softly. Cruel? Bonnie smirked. Life isn't a fairy tale, you know. And how long are you going to stand there? I'm hungry already. Go heat up the soup. Nina obediently followed her mother. As Bonnie set aside her walker and sat down, still muttering to herself, Nina busied herself at the stove. I've been sitting here starving all day, Bonnie complained. And you were at the library, not giving a single thought to your mother. Nina tried to tune her out, but one thought kept repeating in her mind, why does she put up with all this? Yes, her mother was ill, and Nina felt sorry for her, as any decent person would. But when she thought about what her mother had done a few years ago, it seemed like she should have run away long ago. But she couldn't, because her mother was supposedly the most important person in her life. No, Nina never felt particularly close to her mother. As a child, she spent most of her time with her father, until he left for another woman. Oh, how much Nina had suffered then. Of course, her father didn't stop seeing her. He tried to explain that nothing had changed between them. She would always be his daughter, but he just couldn't stay with her mother anymore. Bonnie had always been authoritarian, and when her husband left, she wasn't heartbroken because she lost a loved one but because she could no longer control him. But Nina was still around. So, Bonnie turned her focus on her, ordering her around, making her do everything. By the time Nina was 13, most of the household chores had fallen on her. And Bonnie criticized her constantly if something wasn't done perfectly. Nina endured it all because her mother had warned her that if she didn't listen, she would be forbidden from seeing her father. And she could have done it. Nina's father had moved away and would take her to his place on weekends. Naturally, Nina didn't like his new wife. How could she? She was the reason for their family falling apart. But they had to interact, and Anna tried to build a relationship with her husband's daughter, but Nina wasn't open to it. Eventually, they both agreed that it was enough to just say hello and goodbye. Nina was in her final year of school when her father moved to Washington. He had been offered a significant promotion, and he couldn't turn it down. When Nina found out, she cried a lot, but her father comforted her, promising that he would visit her often. And once she finished school, he would take her with him. She could go to college in Washington, the one she had always dreamed of, and everything would be fine. But things didn't go as planned. That winter, Nina fell in love for the first time. Brendan was her classmate, and it felt serious between them. As the exams approached, Nina wasn't feeling well, and her mother's keen eye didn't miss it. Bonnie, who knew about her daughter's friendship with Brendan, never imagined that things between them had become so serious. But then, it dawned on her. "You wretched little brat," her mother screamed. "If you're pregnant, I'll make your life a living hell." She dragged Nina to the hospital to see a doctor. Nina understood that it was necessary, but no one could have predicted how it would all end. The doctor was a close friend of Bonnie's, and she confirmed that Nina was pregnant, about 6 to 8 weeks along. Bonnie was furious. How could Nina disgrace her like this? Right there in the doctor's office, without even acknowledging her daughter, Bonnie began discussing ways to terminate the pregnancy. "I don't want to," Nina cried, tears streaming down her face. "I'm scared. I'll tell Brendan. He loves me, and we'll get married." "Shut your mouth," Bonnie snapped. "Finish school first, then college. Only then can you think about marriage." She continued her conversation with her friend, ignoring Nina's distress. Nina, desperate not to hear any more, fled the room. She was determined to protect her child. Yes, she wanted her baby to be born. Back home, she tried calling Brendan, but he didn't answer. His phone remained silent. Confused and scared, Nina went to his house, where she was met by Brendan's tearful mother. She told Nina that Brendan had been in a terrible accident and was now in intensive care. Nina rushed to the hospital, desperate to see her beloved, but they wouldn't let her in. She spent the night crying, praying for Brendan's recovery. When her mother came home, she already knew about the tragedy. "And you still think you should have this child?" Bonnie asked coldly. "Do you understand that Brendan might not survive, and you'll be left to raise the child alone?" "Don't say that, Mom. Brendan will get better, and we'll get married," Nina sobbed. "God, you're so naive," her mother sighed. "Even if he recovers, he won't want you, and he certainly won't want this child." "Why are you saying that?" "You're wrong. Remember, I'm always right. All men are the same, they're all traitors. Have you forgotten about your father? Dad's not a traitor." "Oh, he's an angel, is he?" Bonnie sneered. "Enough of this. Let's have some tea. I bought a cake." Nina didn't care about the cake, but she drank the tea her mother made. Later that evening, she felt a sharp pain in her stomach, so intense that she nearly blacked out. She came to in a hospital bed with a doctor leaning over her, asking questions. Everything was blurry, her head was spinning, and her stomach ached terribly. "Who gave you that to drink?" The doctor's words finally made sense to Nina. "You could have just come in for the procedure." "What drink?" "Procedure? I don't understand," Nina murmured, then suddenly bolted upright. "What happened to my baby?" "There is no baby," the doctor replied wearily. "You shouldn't have taken that poison. You had a miscarriage. You're lucky we were able to save your uterus, the bleeding was so severe that we almost had to remove it." Nina couldn't believe what was happening. Then her mother arrived and hissed in her ear. "Remember, you drank that yourself. If you try to blame me for anything, I'll throw you out of the house." Nina understood everything then. Her mother had spiked the tea with something to cause her to lose the baby, but she had miscalculated and nearly killed her in the process. "Mom, why did you do this to me?" Nina whispered weakly. "Because I know what's best for you. You didn't need that baby right now. You'll have more later." Nina said nothing to the doctors. Everyone assumed she was a foolish young girl who had tried to end an unwanted pregnancy after reading some instructions on the internet. But now, whether she could ever have children again was in serious doubt. Only the doctor, her mother's friend, avoided Nina's gaze, and Nina realized it was she who had given her mother the poison. But how could she accuse her own mother of something so monstrous? She couldn't bring herself to say it. Nina left the hospital feeling empty, lost, and betrayed. Bonnie was surprisingly kind and caring. "It's okay, darling, everything will be fine," she reassured her. Nina only nodded, but inside, she felt nothing but pain, confusion, and resentment. Her first instinct was to call Brendan's mother. It took a while for her to answer, and when she did, she said only 3 words. "Don't bother us." Nina was shocked. Why was Brendan's mother talking to her like this? The next day, Nina went to the hospital to visit Brendan. But she was met with another devastating blow. Brendan's parents had moved him to Washington for further treatment. "How is he?" Nina asked, her voice trembling as she spoke to the nurse at the front desk. Nina knew Greta, the nurse, a distant relative from her father's side. "Not well," Greta sighed. "We're hoping the doctors there can do something, but there's a good chance he'll be left permanently disabled." "Give me the clinic's address." "I'll go there," Nina insisted. "I'm sorry, I can't do that. And honestly, you shouldn't go. His parents won't accept you. Your mother was here, causing a scene, screaming that their son is a scoundrel and wishing him dead." "My mother?" Nina paled. "That's insane. Has she lost her mind?" "I don't know what's happening with Bonnie, but she was so furious that even I doubted her sanity. Brendan's mother said she never wants to see either of you again and will never let you near Brendan." Nina realized she might lose the person she loved, and she knew she needed to be by his side, holding his hand and giving him hope that everything would be okay. So, she decided that after her exams, she would definitely move to Washington to study, especially since her father had invited her. But things didn't go as planned. The events she had been through took their toll. Nina didn't do well on her final exams and didn't score enough to get into the college in Washington. Still, her father invited her, promising to cover her tuition. He was willing to do anything to prove that he hadn't abandoned her, that he loved her. Of course, he didn't know what had happened to Nina. She might have shared it with him, but the move to Washington didn't work out. When Bonnie found out that her daughter was planning to go to her father, she became unhinged, sometimes crying, sometimes angry. One day, another argument erupted between them. "Do you think he really needs you?" her mother yelled. "If he were a good father, he would never have left us. He just wants to spite me, to show how generous and good he is, while I'm the evil witch." "Mom, you acted like a witch," Nina said. "How you treated me, have you forgotten?" Nina had never before told her mother that she blamed her for what had happened. Bonnie first turned red, then pale, and finally began to cry. "Sweetheart, forgive me. It was all the doctor's fault. She gave me the pills to slip into your drink, told me to crush 3 for good measure. That's what I did. But you're so small, who could have known it would make you so sick? Please forgive me, darling. I was so scared for you. You have to understand, it was too early for you to become a mother. Get an education, get married, and everything will work out. I'm sure of it." Bonnie hugged her daughter, crying, and Nina believed that her mother was sincerely remorseful. She even felt a bit sorry for her mother, but she still couldn't fully forgive her. However, she didn't give up on the idea of going to Washington. But just before she was supposed to leave, her mother had her first heart attack. Bonnie was taken to the hospital, where she stayed for over a month. How could Nina leave her? Of course, she couldn't. After all, Bonnie was her mother, the closest person to her. Nina visited her every day in the hospital. Her father kept calling, asking when Nina would come, reminding her that the college would soon stop accepting applications. Nina kept postponing, explaining that she couldn't leave her mother, and then she finally told him she wasn't going at all. How could Bonnie manage on her own after the illness? It would be too hard for her. When Bonnie learned of her daughter's decision, she seemed to recover more quickly, and Nina was even able to enroll in a local college that same year. There was a shortage of students in the preschool education program at the local teachers' university, so Nina decided to study there. After all, the important thing was to get an education. She would work with children. Yet, a small ache remained in her heart over what she had lost. But Nina tried not to dwell on it, and Bonnie was satisfied. Her daughter stayed close. Her father invited Nina to live with him a few more times, but she never could bring herself to leave Bonnie. She forgave her mother for all the hurts and now pitied her sick mother. Eventually, her father stopped asking and later announced that he was moving abroad with Anna. Of course, Nina felt a bit sad that she never got the chance to live with her father in Washington, but she convinced herself that everything happens for a reason. At least, that's what she told herself. And with time, Nina thought less and less about Brendan. There was no news from him, but as the saying goes, no news is good news. If Brendan had died, her classmates would have informed her. Since they hadn't, it meant he had survived. Hopefully, he was on the mend. By now, they were complete strangers, and Brendan's mother could stop worrying. Nina's life entered a new phase. She was a student, and her world revolved around home, the library, and the university. By the time Nina was in her 4th year, her mother's illness had become severe. What had once seemed like mere feigning was now undeniable. Bonnie had suffered a stroke. When her father heard about what had happened, he called, asking how he could help. Of course, money was needed for medication, treatment, and a nurse. At first, her father was generous, offering substantial support. But over time, his help dwindled. And Nina felt uncomfortable asking for more. For a while, to make ends meet, she worked as a janitor in a shopping center after college, barely making it home in time to care for her sick mother. Bonnie accepted this help as if it were her due, even expressing dissatisfaction that her daughter left her alone for so long. Nina endured it all. Over the years, she had become incredibly patient, as if she had grown a protective shell, and nothing could faze her. She was entirely focused on her studies and caring for her mother. She didn't even make any friends during her college years. But when Cole appeared, Nina's heart skipped a beat. She longed for attention and care, even if it was just a simple bouquet or a bar of chocolate. It was so touching. Cole seemed perfect to her, open, kind, and, to be honest, incredibly handsome. He was strong, broad-shouldered, with dark wavy hair and blue eyes. He was the kind of guy you could only dream about, and it didn't matter that he was just a driver. What mattered was that he was a good person. Cole called her the day after they met, and 2 days later, they were walking in the park. Fluffy snow was falling, the streetlights were glowing, and Nina was walking arm in arm with the most wonderful person in the world. She wanted to believe that this was true love. Bonnie found out about their relationship about a month later. She caused an uproar, of course, but for the first time in years, Nina firmly told her mother. "If you try to stop me, I'll move into the dorm, and you can stay here alone. Live however you want." Bonnie was powerless in her rage. What could she do now, confined to a walker? So, she gave in. And when Cole came to meet her, she was calm and kind, and when he proposed to Nina, she nodded in approval. Cole and Nina got married right after she graduated from university. They decided to live with Bonnie in the countryside, with Nina working at a city kindergarten and Cole continuing his job in construction. Why spend money on renting a place when they had their own home just half an hour from the city? Then something wonderful happened. Her father, who couldn't attend the wedding, gave Nina an incredible gift, a substantial sum of money transferred to her account, with the stipulation that she buy herself a place in the city. Nina was ecstatic, Cole was pleased, but Bonnie threw a fit. How could she live alone? She insisted they take her with them. The thought of taking Bonnie along didn't appeal to Cole. Nina was also tired of living with her mother, who had since regained her strength and could even move around without a walker. She was speaking better too and, in general, could manage on her own. "Mom, to put everyone at ease, a social worker will come to check on you," Nina tried to persuade her. "I'll go arrange it tomorrow." "I don't need any social worker," her mother shouted. "Who's going to come? Gladys? That fat cow? Or Jara? They say she might steal something. And she's a slob. Don't slander them, they're fine," Nina brushed off her mother's complaints. "Girls, don't fight," Cole interjected. "I'm sure we'll find the best option. Bonnie, we're not abandoning you. We'll come visit every weekend. The days will fly by." "Oh sure, you'll visit," her mother sneered. "You'll send Nina here while you go out partying with other girls. Already got your eye on someone?" "Mom, what are you saying?" Nina gasped. "I'm just telling it like it is. All men are the same." Bonnie grumbled, then waved her hand dismissively and retreated to her room. Cole just smiled, pulled his young wife into a hug, and whispered in her ear. "Don't listen to her. I love only you." And Nina knew that was true. They bought the apartment in the city and soon moved in. Bonnie stayed in her house with the social worker, and the young couple visited her every weekend as promised. Then something unexpected happened. Bonnie fell in love. The neighbor across the street had been widowed a year ago and started visiting her regularly. Before long, they moved in together. There was no longer any need to visit Bonnie every week. For Nina, this was a relief. For the first time in years, she felt light and free. Bonnie stopped bothering her with constant phone calls and endless demands. She even stopped talking about how all men were unfaithful scoundrels. Nina and Cole finally settled into a peaceful married life in their cozy little apartment. They lived simply but happily. In the mornings, Nina would go to work at the kindergarten, and Cole would head to the construction site. In the evenings, they would meet at home, share the events of their day, and make plans for the future. They had one shared dream, to have a child. But for some reason, it wasn't happening. Nina suspected that it might be because of the herbal concoction her mother had given her. Of course, she didn't tell Cole about this, but the thought gnawed at her. The doctors confirmed her suspicions. "Yes, it seems you've experienced a significant hormonal imbalance. But don't worry, with the right therapy, everything will be fine. You'll still be able to have children," her doctor reassured her. Nina dutifully took her medication and followed all the procedures. Time passed, but nothing changed. She and Cole still didn't have a baby. At first, Cole was patient, but then he started getting frustrated. Nina cried, then began begging him to consider adopting a child. "Why would I do that?" Cole asked, genuinely surprised. "I want my own kid." "Then leave me," Nina said, uttering the words that terrified her. "Find someone who can give you a child." Cole didn't respond, just smirked. It hurt Nina deeply to see that reaction, and she began to wonder if he really loved her as much as she thought. But soon, the tension subsided and was forgotten. Cole never said or did anything to hurt Nina again. He just loved her, and she felt like the happiest woman in the world. Then came a significant change in their lives. 2.5 years ago, Cole lost his job. Finding a new one in their town was tough, so he seriously considered working shifts away from home. "Nina, can you imagine how much drivers earn out there?" Cole said excitedly. "My friend went there, and now he's thrilled, making good money. 3 months away, 3 at home. It's perfect." "So, you'll be away for 3 months at a time?" Nina asked, disappointed. "Just 3 months. But think about the money we'll have. We might be able to sell our old car and buy a new one. Then maybe even get a bigger apartment," Cole said, painting a picture of a better future. Nina was perfectly content with their apartment. Sure, a new car would be nice, but that wasn't the main reason she agreed with her husband. She understood that he couldn't just sit around at home. What kind of man would live off his wife? Besides, Nina's salary wasn't much. But when her mother found out about Cole's decision, she just smirked. "He'll find himself a girlfriend out there," she told her daughter. Bonnie might have calmed down with her new husband, but her sharp tongue hadn't dulled. Nina decided to ignore her mother's words. Nonsense. So, she sent Cole off with a light heart. And so Cole began working shifts. He rarely came home, but always with money. Their reunions were filled with joy and happiness. 5 years passed since they got married. December had arrived, and Christmas was just around the corner. Nina was expecting Cole any day now. As she made her way home through the storm, an uneasy feeling settled in her heart, as if the storm outside had found its way into her soul, stirring up a sense of confusion and dread. 3 days passed, then a week, but Cole still hadn't come home. When Nina called, he would respond briefly. "I'm busy right now. I'll be there soon. I'll explain everything when I get back." Nina was beside herself with worry, not knowing what to think. Finally, the day before Christmas, she opened the door to their apartment in the evening and saw Cole's jacket hanging in the hallway. "Cole, you're home," she exclaimed with joy, rushing into the living room, only to freeze in her tracks. Cole rushed over to her, looking flustered, his eyes constantly darting back to the sofa where a small child lay sleeping, covered with a blanket. "Shoo, you'll wake her," he whispered urgently. "Cole, who is this?" Nina whispered back, her voice filled with confusion. "This is Lisa." "My daughter," he replied, lowering his gaze. "Daughter?" Nina's throat tightened, and a wave of darkness seemed to wash over her vision. "What do you mean, daughter? How is this possible? And where is this girl's mother? Let's go to the kitchen." "We need to talk," Cole said grimly, and walked out of the room first. Nina followed him, sitting down at the table, her eyes questioning as she tried to make sense of what was happening. Cole stood by the window, silently smoking a cigarette, his nerves clearly frayed. "Cole, explain," Nina said, her voice heavy with pain. "I don't understand any of this. You have a child. Why didn't I know? How old is she?" 2 years old. 2 years. Nina whispered, staring at him in disbelief. "So, you found someone else as soon as you left me? Where is she?" "Your mistress." "Nina, she's dead." Cole crushed the cigarette butt in the ashtray and then sat down beside her, beginning to tell his story. Nina listened, tears streaming down her face as she realized how deeply she had misjudged the man she loved. And, oh God, how right her mother had been. Cole had met Bethany during his first week working away from home. She was a cook in the cafeteria, lively, cheerful, and bold. She caught his attention immediately. After a few days of exchanging glances and playful banter, they ran into each other on the street one evening, locked eyes, and everything seemed to just fall into place. Bethany invited Cole in for tea, and he didn't refuse. He stayed with her until morning, and from then on, their meetings became a regular thing. It wasn't until Bethany told him she was pregnant that Cole snapped out of it. The news was both a shock and a joy. He was going to be a father. He had wanted to be a father for so long, but his beloved wife couldn't give him a child. Yes, he had never stopped loving Nina. Even as he was with Bethany, he was tormented by guilt for betraying his wife. But still, Bethany drew him in, enticed him. And now she was pregnant. He honestly told Bethany that he wouldn't leave his wife because he loved her. Bethany just gave him a bitter smile. She said he could do whatever he wanted, but she was going to have this baby no matter what. And in due time, she gave birth to a little girl. How could Cole abandon his own child? How could he live with himself knowing his daughter was out there somewhere without him? Of course, he didn't turn his back on Lisa. When he returned for his next work rotation, he stayed with Bethany and became a father to Lisa. As Nina listened to her husband, she realized how blind she had been. A month ago, Bethany caught a severe cold, which quickly turned into pneumonia, and 2 weeks later, she died in the hospital. Lisa was left without a mother. Bethany had no grandparents, no family. And how could Cole leave his child behind? He had no choice but to bring her here, to his wife. "Nina, I'm sorry," he said at the end of his confession. "I couldn't leave her in an orphanage." "It's not about the child," Nina replied, trying to hold back her tears. "How could you? How could you betray me like this? You swore you loved me. You always came home so happy, as if you were glad to see me. And I was glad. I'm still glad. Nina, I've always loved and still love only you. I swear. Bethany was. Don't say her name. I don't want to hear it. Nina interrupted sharply, jumping up and running to the bathroom, where she broke down in tears. Cole had been waiting quietly behind the door all this time, and Nina, having calmed down a bit, came out of the bathroom. So what do you want from me now? She said with a trembling voice. Do you expect me to raise your mistress's child? Nina, she has no one else but me, Cole answered timidly. And she's so small, so vulnerable. Don't play on my sympathy. I don't want to hear anything, and I don't want to see that child in my house. A sudden rage overcame Nina, she was shaking with anger. Wake her up and go wherever you want with her. Nina, where am I supposed to go? Cole reasoned. I have no other place to stay. This is my apartment. My father gave me the money for it, and I don't care where you live with your child. The apartment may be yours, but we bought it during our marriage, so I have a half interest. So you're already planning to divide my property? I'm not planning anything like that. I actually want us to continue living together. Nina, hear me out. Yes, I made a mistake, I slipped up. But understand, I was in shock when I found out I was going to be a father. Things weren't working out between us. And now there's a child, a daughter. She's my blood. Nina, I love only you. Forgive me. After delivering his speech, Cole dropped to his knees in front of Nina. He kissed her hands, hugged her legs, and swore he would never do anything like this again. He cared only for Nina, but he couldn't abandon Lisa. Nina listened and cried. Then, the baby started crying in the room. Cole got up from his knees and looked at Nina in confusion. Nina, we need to calm her down somehow. I'm not good with children. But she's your daughter. Yes, she is. But I was always at work, and she barely saw me. After Bethany's funeral, her friends took care of her while I handled all the paperwork. On the plane, she was mostly attended to by the flight attendants. Nina, you're the caregiver. But you're her father. Nina said with sarcasm. Tears had dried on her cheeks, and her anger had subsided somewhat. However, the baby's crying made her heart ache. Nina realized that this tiny girl was alone in a vast world and that she wasn't at fault for being born this way, or for the fact that her mother would never be there again. Pushing her husband aside, Nina walked into the room. The girl was sitting on the couch, rubbing her eyes with her fists, and continued to cry. Hi. Why are you crying? Nina said as calmly as she could. She wanted to smile, but her lips trembled, and her heart turned cold again. She couldn't look at the child without feeling a sense of unease. To her, this little girl seemed like the one she had never known, the one who had tried to come between her and her husband. The child, sensing Nina's cold demeanor, cried even harder. She sobbed pitifully, covering her face with her small hands. Her tiny body shook with the intensity of her cries. Mama, the baby repeated through her tears. Nina's heart softened again, and the coldness melted away. Come to me, little one, don't be afraid, she said more gently, stretching her arms towards the girl. Lisa, don't cry, please. She stroked the little girl's head, then picked her up and held her close. Oh, she's so small. Just 2 years old, and she's already had to endure such a tragedy, the death of her mother. Could Nina ever replace her? At that moment, Nina realized that no matter what, she would never give up this little one. Even though she had come into her family through betrayal, she was now Nina's girl, her daughter. Cole stood in the doorway, smiling awkwardly. Yes, the storm was nearly over. Nina would have to forgive him, especially since she was showing such tenderness to his daughter. Lisa gradually quieted down in Nina's arms, studying her. Then she gently touched Nina's face and hair with her small fingers. "Mama," the little girl said. "Yes, my dear," Nina sighed. "I'm your mama." She hugged the girl tightly and kissed her curly head. "Thank you," Cole's voice came from the doorway. Nina pretended not to hear him. No, she hadn't forgiven him yet. That evening was filled with activity and new feelings for Nina. She was a mother now. How wonderful it was. She bathed the little girl, then made soup and fed her. They spent some time drawing. Cole was always nearby, trying to stay in the background so as not to provoke his wife's stern gaze. But he knew the storm was coming. By evening, Nina lay on the couch with Lisa, reading her a story. When the little girl fell asleep, Cole peeked into the room. "Nina, are you going to bed?" he asked. "I'll be sleeping here," Nina replied curtly. And he went to the bedroom. Nina lay awake for a long time, reflecting on everything she had heard from her husband, replaying it all in her mind. But then, looking at the sleeping child, she realized that even though she hadn't had her own child, God had sent her this little one to raise as her own. And this was the greatest gift of Nina's life. And Cole. Of course, she would forgive him, she already had. For some reason, Nina was convinced that this was his only mistake in life, and that he would never act like this again or betray her. The next morning was busy with errands. Nina, Cole, and Lisa went shopping. First, they ordered a child's sofa, then a bunch of bedding for the little girl. They also bought clothes, toys, and toiletries. Cole watched the balance on the card steadily diminish and grew increasingly gloomy, while Nina, almost with a kind of fury, wanted to spend more and more. Then Nina slowed down. It was also possible to end up with no money at all, and that wouldn't be any better. After buying groceries for the festive table, they headed home. Lisa was already asleep in her car seat on the back seat. Nina and Cole drove in silence. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome," she replied curtly. "And I'll repeat it again, this will never happen again." Nina shot a quick glance at her husband, bit her lip, and turned her gaze towards the window, focusing intently. It wouldn't happen again. Yes, she should be angry with her husband, but now she even felt a kind of gratitude towards him. After all, this situation had awakened her maternal instincts for the first time. Yes, now she was a mother. "I forgive you," she finally said, turning around and looking at her husband seriously. "We are a family, right?" "Yes, we are a family," her husband replied, and a smile froze on his face. At home, after putting Lisa to bed, they decorated the Christmas tree together, trying not to make noise, speaking in low voices, and even joking. The ice between them had melted. Later, they went to the kitchen to prepare dinner and think about what to serve Lisa at the festive table. They decided that at 2 years old, she could try a bit of everything. Yes, this was their first Christmas with their daughter. When Lisa woke up, she saw the Christmas tree, and her excitement was boundless. And when she found a walking doll under the tree, it was pure happiness. Soon, their new sofa arrived. Nina and Cole set it up in the room where they had planned the nursery. They decided to wallpaper the room after the holidays. For now, Lisa could enjoy her new toys, books, and clothes. Yes, their child would have the best of everything. In the midst of their busyness, they didn't notice how the evening came, and then the doorbell rang. "Are we expecting anyone?" Cole asked, surprised. "I don't think so," Nina shrugged and went to open the door. At the doorstep stood her mother, Bonnie, with her new husband, Frederick. "Hello, daughter. We decided to surprise you," Bonnie said with a smile. She looked quite refreshed now, and you wouldn't know she had ever had a stroke. Bonnie entered the hall, and Frederick carried in a large bag. "We brought some food and gifts." Bonnie laughed, seeing Cole peeking out from the kitchen and waving her hand. "Hello, dear son-in-law. Do you mind if we celebrate Christmas with you?" "I don't mind," he said with a polite smile. Of course, Cole had other plans for Christmas Eve. He wanted to fully reconcile with Nina. But they couldn't just send the guests away. Nina was also a bit shocked by her mother's arrival. However, Bonnie was in for a surprise too. Lisa came out of the living room, holding a doll under her arm, and stared intently at the unfamiliar woman. "Grandma," the little girl suddenly said. Bonnie, hearing the child's voice, turned around, froze, and then broke into a smile. "Oh, whose wonderful child is this?" she asked sweetly. "Ours," Nina answered calmly. "What?" "I don't understand," Bonnie said, looking at Nina in surprise. "This is my daughter and Cole's daughter," Nina explained just as calmly. "I still don't understand. How is this possible? Did you manage to give birth and raise her to this age? How old is she?" "A year and a half. 2 years old," Cole's voice came from behind. "Our daughter's name is Lisa. Did you adopt her from an orphanage?" "No, Mom, she's not from an orphanage. Anyway, please come in and make yourselves comfortable. Let's discuss this later." Bonnie shrugged, and Frederick did the same. They all got busy with the last-minute holiday preparations. Nina, happy to have some help, spent more time with Lisa. Bonnie, seizing a moment, pressed her with the question that was troubling her. "Come on, tell me. Where did you get this girl from? Did you steal her or something?" "No, Cole brought her. She's his daughter and the daughter of his late lover," Nina said unexpectedly, simply and calmly. Upon hearing this, Bonnie sat down on a nearby chair. "And you talk about it so calmly?" she asked, astonished. "What can I do? I can't have my own children, by the way, thanks to you." "Nina, don't start. God has already punished me for that," Bonnie said plaintively, and then immediately perked up again. "A lover? So he did cheat on you after all? I told you, they're all the same. And don't start on that either," Nina snapped. "This is Cole and my business, and we will decide how to handle it ourselves. We're staying together. But the child is from the woman your husband cheated on you with. Nina, how can you accept her?" "Easily. She's my girl now too. Mom, if you don't like it, you can leave. By the way, I'm not too fond of your husband either, but I don't mention it to you, so stop interfering in my family." Bonnie had no reply and spent the rest of the evening sitting thoughtfully, casting occasional glances at Cole and the little girl. The next morning, as they left in a taxi, she whispered to Nina. "You're such a fool, Nina. He's cheated on you once, and he'll keep cheating. Are you going to accept all his children now?" Nina didn't respond to this jibe, she simply wished her a safe trip. Then, hugging her husband, they watched the taxi drive away, puzzled as to why her mother had come for Christmas without warning and managed to spoil the holiday. "Did she also say nasty things about me?" Cole asked. "Yes," Nina smiled. "She was in shock when she found out how we got Lisa." "And you? What about me? Were you in shock too?" "I was, but now I'm happy. I'm happy that we're a family of 3. And they embraced and kissed. Meanwhile, the taxi carried Bonnie and Frederick out of town. "Didn't you tell her anything?" Frederick asked. "No. Why should I?" she shrugged. "Let her live with her Cole as she wants. She's raising this child. She's foolish. Her husband cheated on her, and now she's going to dote on this girl. No self-respect. And she doesn't need to know everything else. Yes, I wanted to surprise her with everything at Christmas, but then I changed my mind. My daughter deserves what she has. If she doesn't want a normal life, then so be it." "Sometimes it seems like you just hate your daughter," Frederick observed. "Sometimes it seems that way to me too," Bonnie said thoughtfully. "And I can't do anything about it." Yes, and it was the plain truth. So many years had passed since her husband left her. She had endured so much because of it. Her husband was long gone, but her daughter had always been there. His daughter. Let her bear the burden of all the grievances that Bonnie's husband had caused her. And what Bonnie wanted to say remained unknown. After the holidays, Nina and Cole began the process of adopting Lisa. Nina wanted the girl to officially be her daughter. Cole was very pleased with this. Nina enrolled Lisa in the preschool where she worked. Nina's life had gained a new purpose. She was now a mother. Lisa had already become attached to her, as she was still so small, and the image of her birth mother had faded from her memory. Nina did everything she could to make the girl happy. Cole left for another work assignment 3 months later. At first, Nina worried that her husband, who had cheated once, might do so again. But she eventually convinced herself that Cole wasn't like that. Trust was important, and that's what mattered. Cole called very frequently, asking about their daughter and Nina's well-being. Nina happily shared Lisa's progress, how she learned new words, performed at a kindergarten event, and experienced many new things. Lisa was growing up quickly, and Nina enjoyed watching her development. Yes, now Lisa was truly hers. Friends and colleagues quickly adapted to the news that Nina was now a mother. They were very happy for her, as she was such a kind and sweet person who had always adored other people's children but had never had her own. It was good that things had changed. Of course, there was occasional whispering about the child being from Cole's affair, but it soon quieted down. Nina's father, who lived abroad, also learned about his daughter's new family situation. Though they spoke infrequently, he expressed his delight over the phone. "Wonderful news," he exclaimed. "I'm sorry I can't visit, but I'll send a little money for a gift for the baby." Nina appreciated the gesture. Her father hadn't been financially supportive for a long time, and while he wasn't obligated to, it was very nice of him. The money arrived in midsummer, just as Cole returned from his assignment. He was pleased to hear about the gift. "We can do a complete renovation of Lisa's room," he suggested. Nina agreed. That evening, they lay in bed discussing ideas. "Let's put up butterfly wallpaper," Nina proposed. "And paint the ceiling green, it will look nice. Also, we should change the lighting. Maybe we could do the other rooms as well." Cole asked. "Cole, this money is for the child," Nina said. "You can earn extra for the other rooms. By the way, how are you doing financially? Did you earn well?" "Yes, not bad," Cole yawned. "The money just hasn't been transferred to my card yet. They promised it soon. Strange. You usually came back with your salary already." "The boss changed," Cole explained. Then he looked at Nina thoughtfully and smiled. "Wife, I don't understand, are you trying to strictly monitor my income now?" "No, of course not, but it's our family budget. Of course, don't worry, the money will be here soon. You're my provider," Nina said, hugging and kissing him. He pulled her close. In the next room, Lisa was snoring. It was blissful to have the whole family together. The next day, Nina gave Cole the card to buy supplies for the renovation while she stayed home to prepare dinner. Less than half an hour later, an out-of-breath Cole burst into the apartment. "Can you believe it?" he shouted from the doorway. "I got a call from work, I need to go back immediately." "But you just got back." Nina exclaimed, bewildered. "I know it looks strange, but what can I do? The boss needs me back the day after tomorrow. The driver is sick, and there's no replacement, so I have no choice. The bus for workers leaves in an hour and a half from the bus station." As he spoke, Cole pulled out his suitcase and began packing. Nina rushed to prepare food containers for the trip. Little Lisa peeked out of the room, questioning. "Yes, sweetheart, Daddy just got here, and now he's leaving again," Cole said, smiling and giving her a kiss on the cheek. "Daddy." Lisa hugged her father's neck, then pulled away and, seriously and clearly, asked, "Don't go." "I have to, my dear. I have to." Cole hugged her once more, lifted her, and walked over to Nina. "Take care of our daughter." "Yes, dear, Daddy needs to go, and we'll wait for him." Nina took Lisa and looked questioningly at her husband. "Darling, when will you be back next time?" "Same as before, in 3 months." Cole hurried to the door, grabbing his suitcase. "Let us at least see you off." "No, I'll be faster on my own." He waved goodbye to his wife and daughter, opened the door, and left. Nina and daughter waved goodbye from the window. Then Nina sighed, surprised by the sudden turn of events. She fed her daughter, read her a bedtime story, and tucked her in. Nina lay down but couldn't sleep, her mind racing with thoughts about Cole's sudden departure. She had planned to spend time with her husband and work on the renovation, but now everything had changed unexpectedly. Then it hit her, Cole had taken her card with all the money. Nina dashed to the hallway cabinet, hoping he had left the card there. She checked the living room, bedroom, and the nursery. The card was nowhere to be found. He must have taken it with him and forgotten to return it. What to do now? All the money was on the card. She only had some small change left in her purse. Nina glanced at the clock, hoping not much time had passed and that the bus hadn't left yet. But it seemed the bus was already on its way. She tried calling Cole, but his phone was out of range. Calming herself with the thought that nothing serious had happened, Nina sat in the kitchen, drinking her cold tea. She would get the card replaced, and Cole would transfer the money. She could manage for a few days. She needed to go to sleep, but rest was elusive. Nina picked up her phone, opened the internet, and began scrolling through the news feed. Then she read a headline that made her vision blur. Just 30 minutes ago, a bus with workers had plunged into a ravine, and everyone had perished. Several bodies were still missing. Nina immediately started dialing her husband's number, but he was still unreachable. She then called the emergency hotline. Nervously, she explained that her husband had taken the bus that morning and was now unreachable. "He's named Cole Barron," she said tearfully to the dispatcher. "I've noted that. Currently, the list is still being updated. As you understand, this is a bus, and tickets are bought without ID. So we can't confirm if your husband was on it yet. Please don't worry, he might have missed the bus or taken another form of transport," the dispatcher replied. "He was supposed to take that bus at that time," Nina whispered. "We'll call you as soon as we have more information," promised the dispatcher. No one called her back. Nina waited all night, and the next morning, with a heavy heart and leaving her daughter with the elderly neighbor, Gloria, she rushed to the bus station. She prayed to God that this was a terrible misunderstanding. Maybe Cole had indeed taken another bus. The woman at the bus station sighed wearily when Nina showed her Cole's photo. "Yes, I sent that bus yesterday. I saw your husband. He was standing by the bus when I checked the tickets. I'm not sure if he boarded, though. There were so many trips in a day, I don't check every passenger's face during boarding." "So you're not sure he was on that bus?" Nina asked hopefully. "I'm not sure. But he was definitely standing there with a suitcase by the luggage compartment," the woman said. Nina's legs went weak. Her last hope shattered. She then spoke with the rescue workers, who confirmed that 3 people were still missing, possibly including her husband. "And the suitcase?" Nina exclaimed in a sudden thought. "Can I check the belongings? If Cole's suitcase isn't there, then he wasn't on that bus." "What belongings, miss?" the rescuer sighed heavily. "The bus caught fire after the crash. The belongings burned, and not all the bodies have been identified. You'll need to do a DNA test. Do you have children?" "Yes," Nina said, slumping from the news. "Where do I need to go?" They explained everything to her and even drove her home. "Don't stress too much, conserve your strength," the rescuers advised as they left. What followed was the painful process of identification. Nina did not recognize any of the deceased. A DNA test was taken from Lisa. The days of waiting were agonizing, both mentally and financially. Nina called her mother and told her about the disaster. Bonnie listened, expressed her sympathy, and urged her to stay strong and hopeful. When Nina mentioned needing some money, her mother exclaimed, "Where would I get money from? Hold on, daughter. Besides, you have a father living abroad, living in luxury. Call him. But he recently sent me money. Cole accidentally took my card, and when he left, he forgot to return it." "Oh, I see. So, the deceased turned out to be a fraud after all," Bonnie smirked. "Don't say that, Cole hasn't been declared dead yet," Nina shouted. "Mom, I don't understand why there's such indifference to my problems. I'm your daughter. Don't you remember how I took care of you after your stroke, how I worked to make ends meet for us? And you were supposed to. You're my daughter. I gave birth to you and raised you. What else was I supposed to do? I don't owe you anything. You're an adult, handle your own problems." "I am handling them," Nina replied wearily. "Just understand, I have a small child to care for. And this whole situation is strange. Who is this girl to you?" "Nobody. Why did you adopt her? Send her to an orphanage. It will be one less problem." "Mom, you're saying terrible things," Nina said, and she hung up the phone. After some thought, Nina mustered the courage to call her father. There were long rings before Anna answered. Over the years of not seeing each other, the warmth in their relationship had evaporated. Anna was clearly unpleasantly surprised by the call from her husband's daughter. "Alex is busy right now, he's in the shower," Anna responded to Nina's greeting and, without asking why she was calling or how she was doing, hung up. Her father never called her back. Realizing she was completely alone with a small child, Nina was ready to howl with despair. Then the doorbell rang. It was neighbor Gloria. "Dear, I came to check how you're doing." "Is there any news?" the elderly woman asked cautiously. "Nothing, Gloria, there's no news," Nina sniffled. Shoo, dear, don't cry. Let's go to the kitchen and talk. I brought a pie." "And where's Lisa?" "She's asleep." "Well, that's good. Let's have some tea, and you can tell me everything." The old woman gently nudged Nina towards the kitchen, shaking her out of her sadness just a little. Nina focused on preparing the tea and cutting the pie. Gloria watched her the whole time. Nina sat down next to her and became anxious again. "It's hard for you right now, dear, I understand," Gloria began. "But don't fall apart. Whatever happens, remember you have to live for the child. I've had hard times too." And Gloria recounted how, during the war at the age of 10, she was left to care for her younger brothers. Her father went to the front and died there, her mother died of illness, and Gloria had to raise 3 younger brothers. It was tough, but we got through it. And now times are different, you'll manage. Yes, it's sad about Cole, but what can you do? Pull yourself together and move on. I understand, but it's so hard, Nina sobbed, and without realizing it, she told Gloria about her conversation with her mother, her father, and her financial struggles. They had never spoken so openly before. Your mother will be ashamed of how she answered you. Don't take it to heart. Don't hold a grudge against your father, he's probably dealing with a hysterical wife. It happens. And money? I'll lend you some. I can't give a lot, you understand. The kids don't help me. Oh, no, you don't have to, Nina reddened. Yes, you do, and don't argue. You can pay me back later. I'm even afraid to think about how I'll bury Cole if they find him now, Nina confessed. Don't worry, we'll manage. Don't stress about that, Gloria reassured her. After Gloria left, Nina felt some support. Yes, she wasn't entirely alone. Cole didn't have to be buried. The DNA test yielded no results, and his phone remained silent. Cole remained listed as missing. Nina had to continue living alone, mourning her husband, and raising Lisa. Surviving on a teacher's salary was tough, but the young woman didn't give up. Little did Nina know, another blow was waiting for her. Several months had passed since Cole's disappearance. Nina had somewhat recovered from the grief that had hit her. Each morning, she would take Lisa to the nursery group and then go to the older children's group herself. The whole day was spent interacting with the children, and in the evening, Nina would pick up her daughter and return home. At home, Lisa didn't let her grieve. The little girl was growing up smart and perceptive. Even though she wasn't yet 3, she already knew a few letters, could count to 5, and remembered simple poems. Nina simply adored her daughter and marveled at how wonderful she was. Lisa was deeply attached to Nina with all her little heart. "Mommy," her daughter would say, hugging her. And Nina felt a warm glow inside. Yes, this was her dearest little one. How had she ever lived before without her? One evening, Nina patiently waited in the group for the last child to be picked up. She had already taken Lisa with her, as all the younger children had been collected, and her colleague was eager to go home. Lisa was playing with an older friend with toy cars. Nina kept glancing at the clock and then out the window, wondering where the child's parents were. Finally, a breathless father burst into the group. He apologized, explaining that he had been delayed at work and that his wife was at a spa, so he couldn't come earlier. One evening, Nina patiently waited in the group until the last child was picked up. She had already taken Lisa with her since all the younger children had been picked up, and her colleague was in a hurry to go home. Lisa was playing with an older friend with toy cars. Nina glanced at the clock and then out the window, wondering where the child's parents were. Finally, a breathless father burst into the group. He apologized, explaining that he had been delayed at work and that his wife was at a spa, so he couldn't come earlier. "Well, it happens," Nina replied. The boy and his father ran off to get dressed, and Nina tidied up the toys and then gathered Lisa. As they exited the building, the same father with the child was standing at the threshold. "Perhaps I could make it up to you," he unexpectedly offered. "Let me give you and your daughter a ride home." "Where do you live?" "Not far from here," Nina answered. Overall, she was not opposed to the offer. She was very tired from the day, and Lisa had been fussy. She wanted to get home quickly. "Well, Nicky, shall we give Nina a ride home?" the man asked his son with a smile. "Sure," Nicky replied, taking Lisa's hand and leading her to the car. "A gentleman," the man winked. Nina responded with an ironic nod. She tried to remember the father's name but couldn't recall it. He rarely came. Usually, Nicky was picked up by his mother or grandmother. "By the way, my name is Dallin," the man said once they were in the car. "That's right." Nina blushed. "I kind of forgot." "It's not surprising. You have nearly 30 children in your group. And I'm a rare visitor to your place," Dallin laughed. "How did you know I didn't know your name?" "I'm very observant." "I noticed how you looked at me, puzzled," Dallin smiled again. They chatted about trivial things as he drove them home. Nina thanked him, and they said their goodbyes. At home, she forgot about the encounter, but the next morning, she faced a scandal at the daycare. Nicky's mother arrived, shouting that Nina was a homewrecker. At first, Nina couldn't understand what she had done wrong. Then she realized that Nicky had told his mother that his father had given Nina a ride home and that they had all laughed along the way. "I wasn't even laughing." Nina shrugged. "And even if I had, what's so wrong with that? Your husband simply offered to give us a ride as an apology for delaying me at work. Don't lie to me. You're sleeping with my husband." Nicky's mother suddenly blurted out. "Me? Are you out of your mind?" Nina, outraged, turned red. "I'm not crazy, but you won't be working here any longer." And the hysterical woman ran off to the director. Nina shrugged again, not giving much importance to the conflict. But half an hour later, she was summoned by the director. Victoria was very particular about the reputation of her daycare. Everything had to be perfect, both the staff and their methods. She liked Nina and considered her a good specialist, but in this case, things had gone awry. "Nina, Julia was just here. Do you know who she is?" "Yes, she's Nikki's mother," Nina replied calmly. "Yes, and she's also the daughter of a well-known local businessman, our patron and sponsor. Do you realize that you acted inappropriately toward her husband?" "Victoria, nothing happened. It's complete nonsense. Dallin just gave us a ride." "Oh, so to you, the manager of a major bank is just Dallin?" "Nina, I didn't expect this from you. I just didn't know who he was or where he worked. I'm sorry, I overlooked it. That's a mistake. You should know this family. They are very respected and influential. Even if nothing happened with Dallin, I can't do anything now. Julia is demanding that I fire you." "Nina, I'm sorry, but I have to do it. She's very jealous and very scandalous, and if she complains to her father, which she will certainly do, our daycare will lose its additional funding, and I can't allow that." "Victoria, but I'm not at fault here," Nina exclaimed. "And how am I supposed to resign now? You know I'm raising my daughter alone. I need this job." "I'm sorry, Nina, but it's nothing personal. It's better if you submit your resignation, otherwise, I'll have to fire you." "Believe me, I'll find a reason," Victoria said, looking down. In the end, after a few days, Nina had no choice but to resign, and no one stood up for her. Fortunately, no one expelled Lisa from the daycare. Nina planned to move her daughter to a new daycare as soon as she found a new job, but despite knowing there were vacancies, no one was willing to hire her. Finally, one daycare director admitted that Julia, through her influential father, had made sure Nina was blacklisted as an unreliable employee, making it impossible for her to find work. This left Nina without a job or any prospects. How would she survive? This question tormented Nina. She had no intention of asking her parents for help again, it would only lead to more disappointment. She had to come up with something else. For the time being, with no other options, Nina took up cleaning the floors in her apartment building in the neighboring ones. This was the only source of income for her and Lisa. At one point, Nina got excited about the idea of working as a cashier in a supermarket, but a conversation with the manager quickly dampened her enthusiasm. The job required early mornings and late evenings, with only one day off a week. There were also night audits, inventory shortages, and theft by customers, too many complications. The fact that Nina had a young child likely wouldn't sit well with management. So, she continued cleaning floors. The money was barely enough for the essentials. Occasionally, Gloria would treat them to a pie or some buns. Sometimes she would bring small gifts for Lisa. But Nina's own mother had completely forgotten about her, and even more so about Lisa, she didn't consider her a granddaughter. Her father didn't call either, he probably felt he had done more than enough. He had no idea about his daughter's hardships. Nina felt bitter, hurt by the loss of her husband and the injustice she had faced. Only the elderly neighbor supported her, smiling kindly and assuring her that things would eventually get better. It had been 7 months since Cole's death. To be honest, Nina was looking forward to the anniversary because then she could go to court to have him declared deceased and arrange for Lisa to receive survivor benefits. That money would be a huge help, but for now, they were just scraping by. An additional source of income came about by chance. Gloria once lamented that her favorite robe had torn beyond repair. "If only I would have made myself a new one by now," sighed the old lady. "I even have a sewing machine and fabric, but my eyesight is so poor. I can't do anything anymore. But how I used to sew. I spent half my life working in a tailor shop. I made this old robe myself when I could still see. Why sew now?" "Just buy a new one," Nina replied. "You don't understand, Nina. Something sewn with your own hands carries warmth. All this factory-made stuff is soulless. There's no joy in wearing it. I don't know. It's fine for me. Although I haven't bought myself anything new in a long time, just can't afford it. Honestly, if I knew how to sew, I'd make Lisa a new dress too. They're so expensive in the stores now, Nina said. Then sew one. Gloria perked up. A dress for Lisa and a robe for me. But I don't know how. I'll teach you. I even have some fabric for a dress for Lisa. Nina thought it over and agreed. She brought Gloria's sewing machine, fabric, and all the necessary supplies to her apartment, and under the elderly neighbor's careful guidance, she set to work. It turned out that Nina was a quick learner, mastering the basics of sewing in no time. In less than a month, Gloria had a brand new robe. The dress for Lisa took a bit longer, but by the time the next daycare event came around, the outfit was ready. Lisa was thrilled. The little girl twirled in front of the mirror, admiring her reflection. Nina, too, watched her daughter with pride. She was still so little but already showing signs of the future woman, a budding fashionista. If only she had the means, Nina would dress her like a princess every day. Meanwhile, Gloria spread the word to her acquaintances that she had a talented new student who could sew and for a very reasonable price. Soon, Nina started receiving her first orders. While it was hard to call her a professional, she was more than competent, and the extra income was a welcome boost to her meager budget. At night, Nina sewed and dreamed of becoming an expert in the craft and perhaps even opening her own tailor shop one day. Why not? She no longer felt any pull toward her old profession. It wasn't that she didn't love children, she did, but the way she had been treated had completely drained her desire to work in that field. Lisa continued attending the same daycare where Nina had been fired. Transferring her to another one proved difficult. The other daycares were farther away, and there were no available spots. So, Nina was forced to encounter her former colleagues, parents, and the children she used to care for. The little ones would run up to her, hugging her and asking why she wasn't with them anymore. Nina would hug each of them and explain that she had a different job now. Some parents, overhearing this, would sneer. A job? They had seen her with a mop and bucket. She got what she deserved, she shouldn't have flirted with someone else's husband. Others didn't care. A few times, Nina ran into Julia. Julia would look at her with a smug, disdainful expression. Nina tried to act like she didn't notice. It hurt, and it was humiliating, but she knew she would get through it. One day, outside the daycare, she ran into Dallin. The man recognized her, blushed, mumbled a quick greeting, and hurried past. Nina just smirked, such a pushover. Cole would never have treated a woman that way. Cole. She was still mourning her husband. It hurt even more knowing that there wasn't even a grave for Cole, where she could go to cry over her fate. Soon, it would be a year since her beloved husband disappeared. That evening, after picking up Lisa from daycare, Nina hurried to the store to buy some thread. She needed to hem curtains for a client, but had run out of thread. Afterward, they spent some time in the park, where Lisa fed the pigeons. By the time they were heading home, the sun had already set. As they approached their building, Nina happened to glance up at her apartment windows and noticed that the light was on in the kitchen. Who could be there? She couldn't have left the electricity on, and she hadn't turned it on during the day. Who was in the apartment now? Could it be burglars? She unlocked the door and cautiously stepped into the hallway, freezing in place. There were men's shoes by the door and a jacket hanging on the coat rack. Nina took another step toward the kitchen and almost fainted. Cole was sitting at the table, alive and well, drinking tea. For a moment, Nina thought she was going to lose consciousness. What was this? A ghost? Or was she hallucinating? Cole was supposed to be dead. But then the ghost stood up from the table and smiled broadly. "Hello, girls. Lisa, my daughter, how you've grown," he said, extending his arms to the little girl. "Come here, let me hug you." Lisa, who had been clinging to her mother shyly, suddenly broke free and ran to the man, shouting, "Daddy!" Cole scooped her up in his arms, hugged her, and spun her around, laughing, while Nina stood by the doorframe, unable to laugh along. The terror that had gripped her was replaced by confusion. Was this really Cole, alive and well? "Cole, am I dreaming?" she whispered weakly. He turned toward her, and the smile faded from his face. He set Lisa down on the floor and walked over to Nina. "As you can see, I'm alive. Were you hoping I was dead? Thinking that soon they'd declare me deceased and you'd be free to live your life? I saw the papers in the living room about the upcoming court hearing to declare me dead," he said with a smirk. "Cole, what are you talking about?" Nina exclaimed. "I mourned you every day. I couldn't believe you were gone. But you never showed up, and time kept passing, and this court hearing was inevitable. But tell me, where have you been? I thought you were on that bus." Cole smirked again and paced the kitchen. Lisa followed him, but he seemed oblivious, lost in his thoughts. Nina waited for his response, painfully noting that Cole seemed distant, like a stranger. He didn't even try to hug her, though he looked well, tanned, with a stylish haircut, and clearly wearing expensive clothes. "As you can see, I'm not dead, but you went ahead and created a whole drama. How did you even come up with the idea that I was on that bus? What else was I supposed to think? You said you were going to take the bus with the workers that night, and then I found out they all died when it went off the road, and your phone was unreachable. And you didn't show up for an entire year. And now you're surprised at what I did? Cole, I'm your wife, raising our daughter. I love you." At her last words, Cole shrugged. "Love? All right. Listen, if you want to know the truth, I'll tell you exactly what happened." And then he began to tell her his story, briefly, without much detail. The story went like this. After Cole brought home his lover's daughter, he met another woman during his next rotation after Christmas. Chloe was the daughter of the owner of the company where he worked. She had come to visit her father but lived down south, where she owned a house by the sea and ran her own business. Chloe was a modern, attractive woman, 10 years older than Cole, but that wasn't an obstacle for their relationship. Their feelings for each other ignited quickly. Cole was infatuated with Chloe, and Nina slipped from his mind entirely. But then Chloe left. Cole missed her terribly. Returning to his wife, he could barely contain his frustration, often feeling the urge to argue with Nina. After Chloe, Nina seemed like a dull, gray mouse to him, but she was raising his daughter, so he kept silent. He lived with his wife, but his thoughts were consumed by his new lover. At first, Chloe disappeared, but then she started calling again, asking him to come to her. Cole struggled to find the courage to break things off with Nina, but then Chloe's father discovered their relationship. He was displeased that his daughter had chosen a not-so-promising man who was married and had a daughter. Chloe's father summoned Cole, gave him a stern talking to, and informed him that he was fired. He told Cole that he wouldn't be receiving any more money from him, so he might as well return home to his wife and stop bothering his daughter. With no other options, Cole went back home. But then Chloe called him, just as he was heading to the hardware store. She told him she was in his town, driving back to her seaside home, and if he wanted, he could go with her. She would wait for him at the parking lot by the bus station. Cole didn't need to be asked twice. He immediately rushed home to pack his bags. On the way, he concocted a story about being urgently called to work, as he hadn't told Nina about his firing. Cole also decided not to give Nina the bank card with their money on it, thinking it could serve as his financial safety net. He figured he could return later and make up some excuse about forgetting to hand over the card. No, he wasn't planning on completely breaking things off with Nina yet. After all, she was raising his daughter. But he didn't give much thought to how they would survive financially in his absence. On his way to meet Chloe, Cole withdrew all the cash from their account, ensuring Nina wouldn't be able to block the card. At the bus station, he noticed a bus full of workers, and it struck him that he hadn't completely lied to his wife. There really was a bus. He even chatted with a few familiar faces by the bus while waiting for Chloe. She called him to say she had been delayed, but soon enough, she returned, and Cole hurried off to join his lover just as the passengers began boarding the bus. They were already on the road when Cole read online about the bus accident. It was Chloe who suggested he turn off his phone and tell Nina nothing, letting her think he had died in the crash. That way, she wouldn't bother him. And so began Cole's idyllic days with his lover. The sea, the sun, a luxurious mansion, and a beautiful woman without financial worries. What more could he want? Cole reveled in his love and newfound freedom. During this time, he avoided using his documents, which is why he was presumed missing. The idea of living incognito even amused him. But time passed. Eventually, Chloe's father came to accept their relationship, and the couple began considering marriage. For that, Cole needed to step out of the shadows and, first and foremost, divorce his wife. That's why he returned to the city. Nina listened to her husband confess to yet another affair, feeling nothing but emptiness inside. How had she fallen in love with such a heartless person? He had cheated on her once before, and she had forgiven him. But this time, he had deceived her in such a cruel and elaborate way. For a whole year, she hadn't been living but merely surviving, mourning her husband, while he was off enjoying life with his lover. Nina had taken in his daughter, cared for her, and grown to love her with all her heart. And to Cole, it seemed none of that mattered. Why was she being punished like this? "Cole, what happened to you?" "You used to love me," Nina said, looking into her husband's eyes. "Love you?" "Oh, don't make me laugh," Cole sneered. "I never loved you. From day one, it was all about convenience." "Why not? You lived with your mother, close to the city. I could live in your apartment for free. You cooked well, did the laundry, cleaned up. Everything was fine. Your mom was a bit odd, but it was a relief when you two stopped talking as much." "Cole, you're a monster," she whispered, barely audible. "Oh, spare me," he smirked. "I've been in town for a few days now. I know why you got fired. You weren't exactly bored either." "That's not true. And I don't care. Tomorrow, I'll go to the police and tell them I'm alive. You've caused all this commotion with your paranoia. They won't believe you. They were searching for you. The police will realize you were hiding, and you won't escape punishment." "What punishment?" "Don't make me laugh. Leaving your wife and cutting off contact isn't a crime. You haven't cared about your daughter all this time. You didn't even think about how I was raising her, and you took the last of my money." "Oh, those were peanuts. I spent it on cocktails and a little vacation." "Stop counting pennies and whining. You managed without me, didn't you? Good for you. And don't think the police will bother with that money. You gave it to me willingly. As for my daughter, maybe they'll scold me, but they won't throw me in jail. Get out of my apartment." Nina shouted, barely holding back tears. "Oh, how strict you are." Cole chuckled. "Your apartment? We bought it while married, so I'm entitled to half. Are you out of your mind? This apartment was bought with my father's money. All right, calm down. Fine, I'll leave you the apartment, but I'm taking my daughter." "What?" Nina was so shocked she sank into a chair. "You're not taking Lisa?" "Oh, yes, I will." "Who is she to you?" "Technically, just a stepdaughter. But she's my biological daughter. And Chloe and I live much better than you. We have our own house, a business, money. What can you offer Lisa? Why do you want Lisa? You never cared about her, just like you didn't care about me. That's none of your business. She's my daughter, and Chloe has health problems. We decided not to waste money on IVF or a surrogate mother when we already have a child who is biologically mine. So, dear, I'll see you in court." And with that, he left. On his way out, he casually patted his daughter on the head, like a kitten that had accidentally crossed his path. Lisa had been standing in the hallway the whole time, listening intently to the argument. The little girl didn't understand much but saw how upset her mother was. "Mama, what's a stepdaughter?" Lisa timidly approached Nina and touched her hand. At that moment, Nina was sitting, stunned by the latest news, staring blankly at the wall. Her daughter's touch brought her back to reality. "What, honey?" I asked, "What's a stepdaughter?" "Daddy said I'm a stepdaughter." "He's wrong. You're my precious little girl, and I'm never going to let anyone take you away." Nina burst into tears, hugging Lisa tightly. The thought of them being separated was terrifying. That evening, Gloria arrived and found out everything. "Oh, dear, brace yourself for hard times ahead," sighed the elderly woman. "That scoundrel will make your life hell. He's gotten bold because he's got money now. He's forgotten your love. Now he's obsessed with someone else, and he won't easily give up on Lisa. I won't let him. You should find a good lawyer, but where will you get the money?" "I don't have any, Gloria," Nina sobbed. "I'm hoping the court will see the truth." "How can this be? He deliberately hid all this time, took my money, and nothing will happen to him." "Nothing will happen if he pays off the right people. But don't worry before it's necessary. Right now, you need to be very strong." "I'm so tired of being strong. But you must pull yourself together, dear." And Gloria was right. Serious challenges were on the horizon. The day after Cole's appearance, Nina rushed to the police to report that Cole had deliberately hidden for the past year. But the police wouldn't listen to her and even accused her of misleading them. "Why did you think your husband was on that bus?" "But he said he was going to take it, and the bus station employee saw him." She could have been mistaken, the investigator dismissed her. "You made up this whole story, and we believed you. Now, get out of here, or we'll file charges against you." Nina was in shock, unable to comprehend what to do next. A few days later, child protection officers came to visit Nina. She was at home, stitching a zipper into a jacket for a client. Lisa was nearby, playing with her dolls. When one of the officers entered the room where Nina had momentarily left her daughter, the little girl was sitting by the sewing machine, touching a spool of thread. "Your child could swallow a needle. Don't you realize that?" the officer exclaimed. "She won't do that. I've explained to her that it's dangerous. She's a smart girl," Nina replied defensively. "And I never leave her unsupervised." "Who was she with just now while you went to answer the door?" the officer sneered. "And they trusted you with a child? They say you used to be a teacher. No wonder you were fired." Nina was stunned by what she heard. She grabbed Lisa's hand and pulled her close. "Excuse me, but why are you here?" "I didn't understand at the door," she asked, trying to remain calm. "We're here to check the living conditions for the child, to see how you take care of her, what you feed her, how you look after her." "We've already formed a first impression," the officer said dismissively, glancing around the room. "And I must say, the conditions aren't great. Yes, we live simply, but it's clean. I don't understand why this concerns you. Cole Barron contacted us, saying you're a bad mother." "Me, a bad mother?" Nina's throat went dry at the accusation. "Who do you believe?" He. "Oh, I know he had to leave you for a while because you're hysterical," the officer interrupted. "How dare you insult me?" "I'm not insulting you, I'm stating facts. It's clear you're unstable and nervous. Now, show us what's in your fridge." The officer, along with two others who had remained silent until now, walked into the kitchen. They began opening the fridge and all the cabinets without any regard for Nina's presence. "And what do you feed the child?" one of the other officers asked, shaking her head. There's only a bottle of milk, a few sausages, and half a chicken in the freezer. In that bowl, some cheap cookies. And in the cupboard, a box of cereal and half a packet of pasta, the third officer added. We may not have much, but we're not starving, Nina replied, lifting her head defiantly. If you look under the table, you'll see a box of vegetables. Tomorrow I'm getting paid, and I'll buy Lisa some fruit. And don't forget new tights, the first officer added sarcastically, pointing to the drying rack by the window, where Lisa's clothes, including some worn-out tights, were hanging. All right, we've seen enough. Let's write the report, one of the officers concluded, beginning to fill out paperwork. What are you writing? Nina asked fearfully. Nothing good for you, the officer replied flatly. There's not enough food, the house is poor, and the child is poorly dressed. But you're exaggerating. We live like many others do. We don't care about others. The complaint is about you specifically, the officer said, looking at Nina with a hint of sympathy. Listen, don't get upset or angry. Think about how you'll manage with the child in the future. Maybe it would be wiser to let her go to her father. He clearly has more resources to raise the girl properly. I will not give up my daughter. Nina replied, trembling with indignation. The court will decide, the officer said again in that monotone voice as she continued writing. After they left, Nina held her little girl close, thinking about what was to come. No, she couldn't imagine life without Lisa anymore. She couldn't just give up the girl who had become like her own flesh and blood. Lisa was her child. Mama, are you crying? Lisa asked quietly. Don't cry. I won't, Nina promised, wiping away her tears, but they betrayed her and began to flow again. Lisa gently stroked Nina's hair and face with her small fingers, kissing her cheeks and trying to comfort her like a mother would. But Nina's heart was breaking with a sense of dread. She realized there was nothing she could do. Cole, having crushed their love, was now trying to take away the very meaning of her life. Then came the court date. It was Nina's first time seeing Chloe in person. Beautiful, no doubt, but there was something cold, almost cruel, about her. The thought of this predator taking her Lisa filled Nina with horror. Cole sat next to Chloe, looking at her with love-struck eyes. The sight caused Nina deep pain, and she realized that she was beginning to feel something much stronger than resentment towards her ex-husband, hatred. Nina fought for her daughter in court with all her might. But Cole had a good lawyer, and child services were on his side. The judge took into account that Cole was Lisa's biological father, while Nina had only adopted her. The verdict was crushing. Lisa was to live with her father, and Nina would only be allowed to see her on weekends. How am I supposed to see her? Nina cried. They're going to take her 1,000 miles away. If you have the maternal feelings you claim to, that won't be a problem, the judge replied curtly. It was over. The court process had ended. As soon as she left the courtroom, Nina rushed to the kindergarten, knowing that Lisa was still there. A plan quickly formed in her mind. She would take her daughter, hide her away, and never let this traitor or his cold-hearted woman near her. She would flee to the most remote village and live there with her little girl. But Nina couldn't carry out her plan. When she got off the bus and ran to the kindergarten, a car was already pulling away from the gates. Lisa was in the back seat. Seeing Nina, the little girl strained against her seatbelt, screamed something, pressed her face to the window, and began to cry. Nina couldn't hear what Lisa was shouting, but she felt her daughter's fear deep in her heart. Her little girl was terrified. Stop! Give me back my daughter! Nina shouted, running towards the car. Cole was behind the wheel, with Chloe beside him. Chloe said something to Cole, and he just sped up. The car disappeared around the corner, taking Lisa away. Nina collapsed onto the asphalt, powerless. She sat there, crying, realizing that she had lost. They had humiliated her, crushed her, and torn her heart out by taking Lisa. The thought that there was nothing she could do to change it was unbearable, and she doubted she would ever see Lisa again. Cole and Chloe wouldn't allow it. She didn't remember how she got home. She lay there in a daze, clutching one of Lisa's toys. She had never felt such pain, not even when Cole first left. But now, all Nina felt for him was hatred. When the doorbell rang, it took her a moment to realize what was happening. At first, she thought it was the phone, but then she came to her senses and dragged herself to answer the door. It was Gloria. The elderly woman understood instantly that something terrible had happened. "Don't cry, dear. Don't," Gloria whispered softly as they walked into the room. Later, they sat together as Nina cried, and the elderly neighbor, Gloria, tried to comfort her, urging her to keep living her life. Gloria was the only person who offered Nina any real support. When Nina's own mother, Bonnie, found out what had happened, she simply sighed. "So what's the big deal? Lisa wasn't your biological child anyway, let her real father raise her. And as for him being a scoundrel, I've always told you so. You only have yourself to blame, you should have been more careful when choosing a husband," was all the support Bonnie offered. Nina, overwhelmed by her emotions, abandoned her sewing. She barely managed to drag herself out of bed each morning, to do anything, to go clean the apartment buildings. It felt like this agony would last forever. Everything in the apartment reminded her of Lisa, her things, her toys. She imagined hearing her little voice, her bright laughter. In just a month, Nina seemed to age 10 years. Gloria, seeing how deeply her neighbor was suffering, constantly tried to bring her back to life, giving her new sewing orders. But the orders just sat there, untouched. "You need to fight," Gloria said one day. "Start sewing again, start earning money, and save up for a lawyer." "No lawyer will help me," Nina replied gloomily. "Have you even tried?" the elderly woman snapped. "You haven't even tried. Nina, you need to take action. Take action." For some reason, those words snapped Nina out of her despair. She felt as though she really could do anything. She would earn a lot of money, improve her financial situation, hire a lawyer, and he would prove that she was capable of raising Lisa. No amount of money would save Cole. She would get her daughter back. Yes, her daughter. Even though she hadn't given birth to Lisa, she was still her little girl. Nina began sewing day and night. Over time, her skills improved, her craftsmanship became more refined. She was able to take on orders for evening gowns, and once even made a wedding dress. 6 months passed. Of course, Nina hadn't yet saved up the necessary amount of money, but she was trying her best. She never forgot about Lisa for a single moment, and eventually, she decided to visit her little girl. But as she expected, she wasn't even allowed past the gate of the luxurious mansion. She stood at the entrance, and then left, driven away by the shouts of the security guard. She didn't get to see Lisa. She didn't see her ex-husband or his new wife either. But inside, she felt a surge of anger and determination. When Nina returned home, she threw herself back into work, sometimes sleeping only 3 hours a night, and then sewing and sewing again. Then something unexpected happened. One evening, the doorbell rang. Thinking it was Gloria, Nina opened the door out of habit. Standing on the doorstep was an elderly man with gray hair, dressed in an elegant coat. "Dad?" Nina said, squinting in surprise as she looked closer. "Yes, sweetheart. Will you let me in?" he asked quietly. "Of course." They walked into the living room, where patterns, templates, and fabrics were spread out all over the room. "Is this your workshop?" her father joked gently. "Something like that," Nina nodded, then looked at him curiously. "Dad, how did you end up here?" "Well, I've come back, sweetheart," Alex replied hesitantly. He explained that Anna had cheated on him and then managed to transfer all his assets into her name, leaving Alex with only a small portion. "There's enough money to buy an apartment here and start a small business," he sighed. "I never expected that in my old age, things would turn out like this. And forgive me, sweetheart. I didn't keep in touch with you much because Anna was against it. I even sent you money in secret so she wouldn't know. I loved her so much, but now it's like my eyes have been opened. Did Anna really change that much? I thought she was good. She loved you, and she was kind to me when I was a child, Nina said in surprise. Money changes people. And over there, abroad, she showed her true colors. Now I'll rebuild my life here. And I won't abandon you again, sweetheart. Tell me, how are you doing? Where's your husband, your daughter? At that moment, Nina broke down in tears and told her father everything. Alex listened, growing increasingly grim. He was shocked by everything that had happened in his daughter's life while he was unaware. Who was he after all this? I'm sorry I wasn't there for you during those tough times. But I'm here now, and I'll help you, my dear, Alex said. He offered Nina his assistance. To regain Lisa, a lot of money was needed, and sewing at home wouldn't bring in enough. Alex proposed a business plan. What if they opened a tailor shop, or better yet, a chain of them, with Nina as the head? It would take time to get the business off the ground, but it would be worth it. How long will this take? Nina asked bitterly. Lisa will grow up before we're ready. We'll speed things up, Alex smiled. In a year, everything will be set. Within a few days, Alex began actively promoting his daughter's business. He purchased 3 small spaces, bought equipment, hired staff, and soon a chain of tailor shops opened in the city. Nina became the owner, though her father handled all the financial aspects. In his later years, Alex finally realized who the most important person in his life was and devoted himself wholeheartedly to helping his daughter. He bought a small apartment, a car, set up an office inside one of the tailor shops, and took care of administrative work. This wasn't new to him. Over the years, he had succeeded in business abroad, and despite his second wife's betrayal, he didn't give up. Nina forgave her father for his past silence and coldness, though she couldn't be too angry with him. In reality, from a distance, he had supported her more than her own mother. Soon Bonnie learned about Alex's return. She was so agitated and eager to see him that she decided to visit her daughter. Alex happened to be at Nina's house at the time. They were all having tea together, Nina, Gloria, and Alex. Bonnie entered, greeted everyone, and sat down at the table. The conversation was awkward with both her daughter and her ex-husband. After a short while, she left again. Why did she come? Nina wondered. Probably to see me, Alex smiled. Dad, do you think you and Mom might reconcile? That's unlikely. I can't stand to look at her now, knowing how she's treated you all these years. I thought she loved you, but it turns out she took out her anger on you because of me. Besides, she seems to be married now. There's no chance for us to get back together. And let's not dwell on that. We need to focus on hiring a lawyer to handle Lisa's case. Nina nodded in agreement. Yes, now they could fight for Lisa. With the apartment being renovated, the business running, and an income coming in, maybe the court would reconsider its decision about who Lisa should live with. But they didn't need to hire a lawyer. Just 2 days later, Nina left her apartment early in the morning to head to work. As she was by her new car, opening the doors, she heard a child's voice. Mommy. Nina turned around and nearly fainted from shock. Standing just a couple of steps away were Lisa and Cole. The little girl threw herself into Nina's arms. Nina lifted her up and spun her around, laughing. Then she stopped and stared in confusion at her ex-husband. Did you arrange a reunion with our daughter? She asked. Yeah, sure, a reunion, Cole replied darkly. Take her and raise her if you want, or I'll send her to an orphanage. I don't understand. What's to understand? She's not mine. Chloe did a DNA test, and it all came out. Apparently, Bethany was seeing someone else, got pregnant by him, and said it was mine. I don't want someone else's kid. Chloe and I will just pay for a surrogate instead." With that, he tossed a small bag with Lisa's belongings and left, leaving Nina in complete bewilderment. The situation was actually straightforward. Cole's new wife had been very suspicious. When the girl began living with them, she wondered if Cole's former lover had tricked him. Chloe wasn't going to raise someone else's child, at least the child should be biologically related to her husband. So, one day, Chloe had a DNA test done, which revealed that Cole wasn't Lisa's father. Cole was furious when he found out. How had his former lover deceived him? He was livid. They wanted to put Lisa in an orphanage immediately in their city. But that would mean Lisa would live there, and even proving that Cole wasn't her father, he would still carry the stigma of having betrayed a child. That was bad for Chloe's business. They decided to give Lisa to Nina and let her raise the child as she saw fit. Cole signed away his parental rights, and the court stripped him of all rights and nullified his name on Lisa's birth certificate. However, Nina was not at all distressed by this. She even changed the little girl's last name to hers. Now she, and only she, could raise her daughter, and no one could prevent her from doing so. 3 years passed. During this time, Nina continued to successfully develop her business, with her father's help. Lisa was growing up and soon would be starting school. For now, Nina had enrolled her in swimming and drawing classes. Lisa was a very talented girl. Nina delighted in and admired her daughter. She needed no one else but her little girl. One day, Nina saw the news on TV. They were reporting on a severe flood in a southern city and the casualties. Nina heard familiar names. A well-known businesswoman and her husband had died. It was Chloe and Cole. Nina took the news calmly, even feeling a bit of sympathy for her late ex-husband. Well, this time it was no drama, just the real thing. "Serves him right," Gloria commented when Nina told her about the incident. During this time, Nina had moved to a new apartment, large, spacious, and bright, and she had brought Gloria along, which made the old woman very happy. Her own children lived far away and didn't visit her. But she was very content with Nina and enjoyed helping to look after Lisa. Gloria noticed that Lisa had started to limp and told Nina about it. Nina also noticed and became worried. They consulted local doctors, but none could find anything wrong. The scans and all the tests came back normal. "But the child is limping," Nina said anxiously. The doctors reassured her that it might just be a pretense, even though Lisa insisted that her leg hurt. Eventually, one doctor recommended going to Washington for a consultation at a renowned clinic. Without delay, Nina and her daughter traveled there. At the clinic, they were directed to the appropriate doctor. When Nina saw the doctor's nameplate, she paled slightly. It read Brendan Klein. Could it really be him? Deciding it was just a coincidence, Nina opened the door and was stunned to see that it was indeed her Brendan. The doctor recognized her immediately. He even stood up in surprise. "Nina? Brendan?" Nina finally entered the office, holding her daughter's hand. The little girl clung to her mother, disliking doctors like most children do. Nina took a seat at the desk with Lisa on her lap. "Is this your daughter?" Brendan asked. "Yes, she is. We have some issues." "Oh my God, Brendan, I can't believe it's you." "It is me," Brendan smiled, regaining his composure. "Nina, I'm so glad to see you. Let's catch up later. For now, let's focus on the matter at hand. What are her symptoms?" The symptoms concerned Brendan, and he ordered a series of tests that required them to stay in the city. "Do you have a place to stay?" he asked. "In a hotel." "Why stay in a hotel?" "I suggest you stay at my place." "We're not strangers," Brendan smiled, "plus, you can tell me all about yourself." "Won't your wife mind?" Nina asked cautiously. "I'm not married. In fact, I've been divorced for 2 years." After the appointment, Nina and her daughter waited a bit for Brendan, and then they went to his house. On the way, Brendan mentioned that he had recently bought the house, intending to live there with his wife and children. But his wife left 2 years ago, saying she didn't want to have children and had other plans. We were just too different, Brendan smiled. So, tell me about you. Nina briefly recounted her life, tactfully omitting that Lisa was not her biological daughter since the little girl was nearby and might understand parts of the story. However, later that evening, after Lisa had fallen asleep, Nina shared everything with Brendan. "Nina, your life is more dramatic than any soap opera," he exclaimed. "How did you manage to cope?" "I somehow managed," she shrugged, then looked at him intently. "Brendan, you never told me how you got through everything." "Your mother wouldn't let me near you. I tried calling you afterward, but you were unreachable." Brendan explained that he had spent a long time in the hospital and only managed to recover thanks to skilled doctors. He had tried to call Nina, but his mother had deleted all the contact numbers from his phone. After that, things got complicated, with a long rehabilitation period. He decided to pursue medical school, and as he neared graduation, he found his old classmates on social media. Through them, he learned that Nina had gotten married and decided not to disturb her. But he still wanted to reconnect with his first love. A few years later, Brendan visited his hometown and stopped by Bonnie's house, leaving his phone number with her and asking her to pass it on to Nina. Bonnie promised to deliver it, but it seems she never did. Brendan soon married a colleague, but their marriage was short-lived. They realized they couldn't make each other happy and separated. Now, Brendan was alone. "When did you visit my mother?" Nina asked. A thought struck her. She remembered how her mother had unexpectedly arrived and then just as unexpectedly left. "It was around Christmas," Brendan furrowed his brow. "I see. So she came to give me your number but never did." "Oh, Mom, why did she treat me like that?" "You don't know something else, Brendan. I was pregnant with your child." Nina then shared her first adult tragedy. Brendan listened, growing increasingly somber, realizing how differently things might have turned out if the adults hadn't interfered. But they believed they knew better and what was best for their children. Fate had unexpectedly brought them back together. They talked until midnight and then fell asleep together, hugging on a small couch, just like children. They were together now, and nothing could separate them. The next morning, Brendan proposed to Nina as soon as she opened her eyes, with a bouquet of flowers by his side. "I didn't have time to get a ring," Brendan said shyly. "There's only a flower shop nearby. But I will definitely get one." "Nina, will you marry me?" "I do," she whispered, "but what about your mother? She probably won't approve of your choice. She never liked me. My mother has changed a lot. Recently, she admitted to me that she regrets separating us." "Interesting. How will my mother react to this? Are you very concerned about that?" "Not at all. Lately, I don't care much about what others think. I want to live for myself and my child," Nina said, then blushed. "Brendan, you won't hurt Lisa, will you? You understand, she is and mine," he smiled in response. "But I can't have another child." "But we already have Lisa." Brendan gently kissed Nina. Then he suddenly remembered something and straightened up. "By the way, the first results of Lisa's tests should arrive today. We need to go to the clinic. It's time to wake Lisa." "I'm already awake," came Lisa's voice. "Have you been standing here?" Nina peered over Brendan's shoulder. "Were you eavesdropping?" "I was just watching you kiss." "Don't be embarrassed." "I won't tell anyone." Lisa winked mischievously, and the adults laughed, calling her over. They all collapsed on the couch together in laughter. "Brendan, you're the kindest doctor in the world," Lisa suddenly said seriously. "And I think you make my mom very happy." "I really hope that's true," Brendan smiled. "By the way, I proposed to your mom. Would you be okay if we got married?" "I'd be very happy," Lisa replied, her face lighting up with a smile. They went to the clinic. The initial test results were reassuring. showing that Lisa's leg was not in serious trouble. Later, the final results came in. Brendan explained that there had been concerns about sarcoma, but fortunately, it turned out not to be the case. There was a small growth in her leg, but it was benign. Nevertheless, surgery was still necessary. Lisa was terrified of the surgery and cried. "They're going to cut off my leg," the little girl sobbed. "No one is going to cut anything off." Dr. Brendan reassured her gently. "There will just be a small scar on your leg. Are you sure you're not lying to me?" The girl looked trustingly into the eyes of the person she really liked. "Would I lie to my daughter?" At these words, Lisa brightened up, hugged Brendan, and whispered, "Can I call you Dad?" The man nodded confidently in response. Nina and her daughter spent several months in Washington. During this time, Lisa had the surgery, which was successful. The doctors were confident that everything would be fine going forward. Nina lived with Brendan throughout their stay. She met his mother, who, as Brendan had said, was now supportive of their relationship. They decided to hold the wedding in Washington after Lisa's discharge. Many guests were invited, including Nina's father and Gloria. They, of course, came. Nina hesitated for a long time about whether to invite her mother, but eventually, she called her, told her about the wedding, and invited her. "What, to that Brendan?" her mother exclaimed on the phone. "Yes, Mom. No matter how hard you tried, we're still together," Nina replied. "What did I try? I did nothing." "Oh really? Didn't you give me medication? And then forgot about Brendan's phone number? Oh, stop remembering that medicine. You should thank me for sparing you from premature worries. I will never thank you for that. And the phone number? Yes, I didn't give it. I came to see you, saw you, Cole, and the girl. I thought you already had a family. Why would I bother you? That's why I didn't mention it. You should thank me too, because if you had reconciled with Brendan, you might have left Cole and the child, and you wouldn't be a mother now. And do you know what I would have done?" Nina smirked. "Never mind, Mom, it's a moot point. Anyway, if you want, come to the wedding." But her mother didn't come to the wedding, and Nina stayed in Washington with her beloved. Nina's father took over the business in her hometown, and Gloria was looked after. Lisa had already started school and was doing very well. She no longer swam, the girl had developed a passion for dancing, and there were no contraindications for this. Nina returned to work, deciding that running a business wasn't for her, and got a job at a preschool, which she enjoyed very much. However, she didn't work there for long. Shortly after the wedding, she started feeling unwell and thought it was food poisoning. Brendan immediately went to the pharmacy to get a pregnancy test. "Brendan, it can't be. The doctors told me," Nina protested, reluctant to take the test. "It must be just food poisoning." "Listen to the doctor," Brendan said sternly, frowning. "Go and take the test." He left no room for argument. Nina had to go to the bathroom, and a few minutes later, she came out looking bewildered. "Maybe it's defective," she said uncertainly, handing over the test which clearly showed 2 lines. "I bought several, from different brands," Brendan replied, handing her 3 more tests. All of them clearly showed 2 lines. So, not expecting to experience the mysteries of motherhood, Nina was pregnant, which could only be described as a miracle. In due time, Nina gave birth to a boy. The parents decided to name him Harry. Lisa was thrilled to have a little brother and was very proud to be his big sister. So it happened that 2 lovers, having gone through many trials, were reunited once more. This is what happens when love is true, it will always find a way to bring 2 kindred hearts together. It's a shame that before this can happen, one often has to live a life that isn't their own, a life imposed upon them. When you're pushed off your path, you try to move on, build relationships, create families. But it's not your life, and as a result, you endure so much sorrow, despair, and failure. Nina and Brendan were fortunate that they found each other again after just over 10 years. They still had much happiness ahead of them. It's sad that sometimes the closest people can turn out to be worse than enemies. And then they wait for their fate. Just like in our story. Bonnie called Nina when Harry was about 6 months old to congratulate her on the baby. "See, you were able to have a baby, and you were so upset with me," Bonnie remarked. "Why dwell on the past?" sighed Nina. "Mom, was there something else you wanted to say?" Yes, dear, I did," Bonnie hurriedly replied. "I've had some bad news." She explained that Frederick had left her, and she had serious health problems now. Her legs had completely failed her. "I'm crawling around the house now," her mother sobbed. "Nina, help me." "And how can I help?" Nina responded, echoing her mother's words from years ago when she was left without money. "I'm far away. You should contact social services." "Have you even gone to the hospital?" "I have. They said it's the effects of a stroke manifesting after all these years. They prescribed some pills, but they don't help." "Okay, I'll tell Dad to come visit you." "Alex won't come," her mother said bitterly. "He will. And this summer, Brendan, the kids, and I will come too. Don't worry, we won't abandon you." "Thank you, dear. And forgive me, the old fool. I was angry with you my whole life because of your father, but I should have been angry with myself. Let's not dig up the past, Mom. We need to live in the present. Don't worry, I'll call social services right now and arrange for a caregiver. Dad will come and see what else he can do," Nina said, and said goodbye to her mother. Of course, Bonnie hoped her daughter would take her in, but even this was something. Then something incredible happened. Alex, at his daughter's request, went to see his ex-wife, and he felt so sorry for her. He suddenly remembered that he had once loved this woman, and he was essentially the cause of all her suffering. Because of him, she had mistreated their daughter. Alex felt ashamed. He apologized to Bonnie. For the first time in many years, they spoke openly. Then Alex took Bonnie back to the city. There, local doctors treated her, and now she could walk a little. Her character remained difficult, but she had calmed down. Why did this happen? Because she found happiness in her old age. And because she forgave and was forgiven. Forgiveness is the most important thing in life. Through it, light enters our lives, illuminating our hearts with kindness. As promised, Nina visited her mother in the summer. Unfortunately, the occasion was not a joyful one. Her beloved Gloria had passed away. The old woman was buried as was customary, and only at the funeral did Nina see Gloria's children, her son and daughter, who were already older, confident, and 4 grandchildren, also grown up. For some reason, they thought that communicating with their mother and grandmother only over the phone was enough. They had their own lives, and she had hers. It was only at the coffin that they understood how hard it is to lose a loved one. They would never hear her voice again or learn about her affairs. Only in dreams would she occasionally come to say something important. Nina stood at the cemetery and thought about how good it is when loved ones are near, when you can call them, talk to them. Yes, sometimes loved ones are wrong and do cruel things, but it's important not to become hardened yourself, and if necessary, to extend a helping hand. Life isn't eternal. It all ends